So Shiv, you remember from like the last episodes, we were talking about razors, and we were talking about in reference to George Mack and the razors, 18 razors he was talking about. I think we went over like two or something. So we'll go through the third one, which is the Instagram razor. And I think you might like this one. So what he says is basically, I'm quoting him. He says, when you see a photo of an influencer looking attractive on Instagram, assume there are 99 worse variations of that photo you haven't seen. They just picked the best one. So, like, what do you think about, like, what's your perspective on that? Or how do you interpret that?
Well, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. And the reason for that is I think people are quick to share the end product, the perfect end product, rather than the whole journey. And I think this is what social media has allowed for. You know, it's a perception of perfection rather than a perception of reality. And the reason I say that is you don't see the real things on social media. I mean, there are some aspects of it that are real that people do share. But if we purely look at things that are, in terms of the success matrix, it's just success metrics that you see on Instagram, you don't see what led to that success. And so it paints a picture of it's, I wouldn't call it a false reality, but I think people perceive it as perfection when it shouldn't be perceived. Nothing is absolutely perfect, you know, because there's a lot of things that there's a lot of work that's involved to make it perfect. So, I mean, yeah, that's a perfect example. Like out of 100 photos, you pick the best one.
Yeah, or you made like 99 variations of it as well, of that one photo as well. And yeah, I completely agree. I think it's just like with social media, you only see like the highlights of the journey, like just highlights of the match, but you never get to see what happens behind the scenes of any of the things. Like I think social media is like 10% of what the reality is. It's like the way I think of it is like the iceberg analogy, where it's like you only see what's on the surface, which is probably like 10-20% of the outcome, but you never see the 80-90% of the amount of effort, the stress, the difficulty, the sacrifices, and all those things that went behind to get to that outcome.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've got such short attention spans that we don't actually understand what went into that success. So for example, you might see a YouTuber with 5 million subscribers, and they've been doing it for 7 years consistently, day in, day out, making the videos, making it perfect. And, you know, at the surface, yeah, they've got 5 million subs and you think they've made it. They have. I mean, that's their success and that's what they show. But behind that success is 7 years of tears, 7 years of stress, 7 years of adversity, 7 years of having, you know, having the absolute best out of, like, having fun from it. But you don't see that, you know. And I think people connect a lot more with struggles. Like if you're able to share your struggles and the challenges, people can connect to that a bit more because it shows a sense of humanity. We see success and we think we can replicate that success, but we can't replicate the work to get to that success. That's the difference. You know, like someone with a 6-pack and a really nice body or a really successful business or so, it's easier to say that I can achieve that. And then when you actually start the work, you realize how hard you have to work for that outcome, you know? So you're right. I think it goes back to Chris Williamson's quote, like the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding, right? It's like there is so much potential for you to find in that success, like find your success in that work, but you know, you're either procrastinating or you just don't want to put in the work. I mean, that's a lot of people. I mean, it's everyone actually. Everyone has days where they just don't feel like doing things, or they just probably don't want to put in the work, and it happens to the best of people, you know. So, and I think hearing from successful people that have those days helps as well. Do you agree?
Yeah, like basically, it's more relatable as well. And
Yeah.
it's like I think a sense of humility as well to be able to be honest and admit that there's moments where they have that that type of thing. As you said, like it makes them more human. I think that's what people like to relate on and watch. Like even watching this guy called Sam Sulek, right? He's pretty popular in like the fitness industry. And he does, when you look at his edits, it's nothing flashy. You know, it's not like those cool, crazy funk type of background music and it's like vaporwave type of stuff going on, animations and all that. It's just very raw. Like it's just him going to the gym, talking like his thoughts that he has and like these perspectives that he has, he just talks about. And he does like 3-hour workouts or something and just talks, just eats, just casual things, just vlogging. No crazy fancy edits. It's just him by himself, just recording. And people like, and he's blown up in the industry. And I think part of it is because it's just raw, it's authentic, it's real, it's relatable, and it's inspiring as well. And I think that's what people really like these days. They just like authenticity, much more than just like the whole, flashy type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think we lack authenticity in this day and age now, as well. How often do you actually see?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, you want to say sorry?
I was saying like they make 99 variations, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
99 variations of who you are, even as a personality. Like you've got to be a certain type of person to get clout, or be a certain type of person to do certain type of things to get success. But in the process, you lose yourself. Like Sam Sulek, for example, that example that you shared, I've heard of his name and I think I've seen him. But it's the authenticity and it's the fact that who he is on that camera is exactly who he is without that camera. And I think that's what we're not quick to make we're so quick to make judgments on people that you see on camera that you actually forget that behind that camera is a person with emotions, a thought process, how they think, how they act, how they behave. And that own person has their own personality with their own lives, with their own experiences. And with that experiences, they have their own wisdom, they have their own teachings, they have their own views on things, they have their own values. So it's quite fascinating because I think if you walked around the city, any major city in the world, it's such a fascinating thing that everyone is an NPC in a way. It's insane because it's like you're the main character in that story, but then everyone else is the main character as well in their own story. And so everyone you see around you is an NPC in a way. Like you don't think of people as people. It sounds strange when I say that, but you don't. Like it's just that person just walked past me, that's it. Like, but that person maybe has years of experience in something, has trauma or has something, So everyone has their own story, and I think I find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, and it's just like with going back to this thing, it's like 99 variations to make it seem like the perfect. It's like you just don't hear those stories.
No, you don't.
Because they adjust it such that they don't want to expose like that part of themselves. And maybe it's just they don't expose it amongst themselves as well. Like as in they're not honest with the part of themselves that are, dark or just that has traumas and things from like childhood or self-limiting beliefs they just don't admit. That ends up becoming a manifestation of like addictions and things.
Yep.
So
no, 100% agree. But again, like I think it's with social media, I don't know how life was in the early 2000s or late 1990s in terms of if we just looked at human interaction, people interacting amongst each other, how people perceived other people. But I think with social media now, I think everyone's a bit disjointed now. You don't see people for people. You just see them as either numbers or you see them as, if they have an opposing view on something, you don't actually see them as a human with a different perspective. You see them as an enemy with a different goal that they're out to get you or something. So I think social media has actually brought that on as well.
Yeah, I think like you can call that labeling, like as in you see someone with this type of belief or this type of thing, you just automatically class them as like they should be cancelled. Like labeling basically culture. So I think that's been quite, I would say, very much more, I would say, common nowadays in social media especially. And you have a whole community surrounded that labels that individual as this type of thing when you never even heard their story or you don't even know what their side of the story is, and you just stay in that biased perspective and state. So yeah, definitely, I think that's been much more popular because of social media and these communities that are built for around those types of things.
Well, it's a strange one because we live in a day and age where there's so much information out there now. And you'd think that because there's such an abundance of information, people would be more informed, but more open to different perspectives. Because when you have more information, you think, okay, yeah, that conflicts that, but that conflicts this. So, it's not one-sided information, if that makes sense. Like there's opportunities to learn a lot of different things. And that's the strangest part is, despite the abundance of information, we're still in these little bubbles or in little shells.
They call it echo chambers.
Yeah.
Where it's just like you think of this one thought, like, oh, you have like this perspective or something, and then the algorithm, the community you're surrounded by, everything basically reinforces this same perspective over and over again. So that's what's like a chamber of echoes.
I mean, YouTube, any social media platform is a good example of that. Like, let's say you go down the rabbit hole of, going through more conservative politics. Your feed is going to be filled with conservative journalists, conservative YouTubers, conservative content creators that have, a more traditional conservative view. And yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if you're someone that initially has those views and then you have those views and then it gets supported and it's like, yes, I'm right. And you feel a sense of a sort of a dopamine in a way, like you feel validated. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing is like that validation in their life. So they look for this validation elsewhere, which comes back to social media, creating a perfect perception of yourself because there's a sense of validation that you get from that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's only, and I think that's what the flaw of it is. And it's like, at the end of the day, the way I see like social media, its purpose was to connect people. And I think, it's done that, of course. There's obviously other things that it's done, which has made things worse. But I think it can be also used in a positive way, right? If you critically think more, like when you look on social media and you see these types of videos and photos of like a couple, right? You got to think about it like that's only a second snapshot of a perfect moment. But you also got to think, okay, well, if it's consistent, like what are the types of things that they have? Like what are the traits, qualities to be able to get to this state? And like what can I learn from it, basically? Because like there's obviously that state where it's like you can be envious of them and you can operate on that energy where it's like, oh, like they're showing off, they flex, or this guy in his Lamborghini or Bugatti. Like that's American. But like you look at it and you feel a sense of envy, right? And everyone does. But the other side of it is like, what can you learn from this individual? Like, what have they done to get to this point of their life? And if it's consistent, right, it means that they're able to preserve this. So like what qualities, traits, characteristics do they have, and what can I learn and absorb from this individual? And it's like what Bruce Lee says, take what you need. I don't know his exact quote, but something like, just take what you think works for you and just don't take whatever doesn't work for you. So just, obviously you don't want to listen to some guy who has a Ponzi scheme, but you want to listen to someone who's obviously able to preserve wealth and able to build organic wealth. And you can learn so many things from that. Like, I think social media, it really depends on how you use it and where you're getting your source of information from. Because if you listen to like influential thinkers, like you're going to become, then your source of information, everything else will start to become like that as well. You will end up, in a way, absorbing their traits and qualities, or I would say their quotes, and start to actually put that into action and habits and characters, and in a subconscious way. And I think that's what it is. Like people say, you are the accumulation of like the 5 closest people. These days, I think you are the accumulation of the 5, or the pieces of information you watch consistently. Like there's certain YouTube's videos we watch, there's certain channels we watch each day. We're actually absorbing that more regularly than even talking to our friends. Like thinking about the text messages you send to your friends. Maybe if you add it up in a day's worth, probably be like 30 minutes or an hour. Thinking about the amount of content you watch and listen to, that's 4 or 5 times as much. So you're actually absorbing more from that than your friends in a way. Whereas I feel like before, as you were saying, we didn't have social media. So you were actually much more, I would say, affected, influenced by your friends. Like, think about school days. You couldn't really use social media as much. I mean, you did, but you were at school majority of the time, right? You weren't at home like going on scrolling, doom scrolling and stuff as much. Probably you do later, but what I'm trying to say is like you spend a lot more times with your friends, so that's why your friends had a bigger influence. But now it's completely different when you're in the adult life. You're more like going through. You're using technology a lot more, so now you become the product of what information you're absorbing. I'd say.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective because it seems like it's a new razor there, right? It was the new technology razor. But you're right. I think you are what you think and what you absorb at the end of the day. I think humans are a sponge in a way, and they just soak in everything that's around them. And if it's a negative energy and all the negativity around and influence that's not positive on you, you're going to absorb that. And that's who you sort of become. You sort of become a bitter person and you don't appreciate the little things. Stepping away from social media for the last 6 months, not being on Instagram, Facebook, any of that, it's given me back more time. I miss the memes for sure. I miss the memes, but there's never a sense of envy. There's never a sense of, is there a bit of FOMO? Probably not. I think the less you know about people, the better for you, because it allows you to just focus on yourself a bit more. But I do know people, use social media for various reasons. So I wouldn't attack someone that uses social media. I mean, they use it to stay in touch, they're content creators, whatever it is. But I do think stepping away from social media for a bit is so good for you.
I was going to say, what made you decide to step away at that moment of time?
Spending too much time. I think not appreciating the finer things. See, I was in holidays last year in December, and I didn't have social media then, and I appreciated the little things more. Like I was in Singapore during Christmas, in Thailand, and you appreciate the little things more. Like you don't need to document all of it. It's just something that's for you. You know it. And what do I get out of sharing it? Not a lot. Personally, I that's how I see it. I don't see any value in sharing it, but people do, and that's fine. But yeah, I think going back to George Mack's view on it, it's the false sense of reality is such it's a very, if you're not careful about it, it's a rabbit hole if you fall down through is something that you might not ever find yourself way back up. You might not find yourself coming back from that rabbit hole. I reword that. But it's it's the negative feelings that you get. Envy, jealousy, not appreciating what you have. You start to see what others have more. And
social comparison there.
Big time. It affects girls more than guys. But, I think guys have... I think Will Tennyson, sorry, I'm butchering his name. Will Tennyson on YouTube. He's a bodybuilder, and he went around asking people if you're on steroids or would you consider taking steroids at different gyms. And so, he approached people and he asked the question, would you ever consider taking steroids or are you on steroids? And a lot of people said no, I wouldn't. People said that majority of people said I wouldn't take it. The people that said I would consider it, then the question was why? Why would you consider taking it? And then the answer was, because I see everyone around me or on social media, these guys jacked, big, and it's okay. And it's does that influence you? And, a lot of these guys that said maybe or yes are early 20s, 18 to 21, right? So their perception is, I just need to get jacked. Which is, look, the gym is a great place. It's a great place. I've been going consistently, but you don't, it's the and this isn't anything against anyone that uses steroids, but it goes back to the fact that you've got people that are looking at that perfection, but along that perfection with steroids comes a lot of health issues. You know, you could become sexually dysfunctional. You could get to a state where you can't have kids. You know, you've kind of ruined your body for the long term. One of the fascinating answers this guy gave during that video was when Will asked him, "Are you concerned about the health issues with it?" He said, "I wouldn't mind sacrificing 10 or 15 years in the later stage of my life if it means I'm jacked now." So he said, if it means I die at 60 or 70, then so be it. At least I'm jacked. Like, at least I'm big. And that was like a turning point, because the priority for him at that point is just get jacked, don't worry about health. But it's not that you take roids and then you just die at 70. You take roids, there's impacts starting from 25 onwards that goes on. So it's a slow detrimental.
Yeah, and I think it speeds up your aging process. Like, as in when you hit 40s, you're not going to be like most of those bodybuilders you see in their 40s are completely out of shape. Like they have a lot of struggles, and that's the side. See, this is the thing you don't see on social media enough of, and they don't even talk about it as much because they've lost the glory. It's the next 20-year-old who's in line to be the big jack guy. And I think that's the thing. I mean, for them, it's different, right? They did it for a career, right? It's completely different. They had a purpose behind. They had a very strong purpose behind why they did it. They didn't do it because they just wanted to be able to be validated. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that form of validation or whatever that is like there's something about like a childhood experience or something where it comes from. If you look deeper into what it is, because like even when you change yourself cosmetically, like surgery, and that's a trap we can fall into, the social comparison, where we compare ourselves and we think this is the ideal type of body and physique, and my genetics doesn't have this. I don't have the insertions. Now I have to get it like through surgery, and then it can come to a point where you keep comparing yourself that you actually end up overdoing it. And I've seen where like the before after of the surgeries, and some of the after photos look completely like they look like an alien. To be honest, like before they looked actually way better and healthier, and then after it's just like the product of, and that's the product of social comparison, to the point that you don't even know who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing things, and you just end up trying to be able to validate this picture in your head of what you think is perfect, but that isn't even yours. That's from other people, how they perceive as perfection, and it's all just social comparison. Yeah, and I think that's the problem. Like it's just. I think instead, like you should use it as a form of social inspiration, and being obviously authentic with what aligns with your values, and also at the same time just realizing that everyone has a different lane that they're driving, and you can look at like cars ahead and get inspiration. You might have pit stops along the way where you can just sit and just be like talk with someone and be like, oh, how did you get that car? How did you get to this speed or whatever, and get inspiration, and you can start to upgrade yourself for your own car. But I think just realize that everyone's just in their own lane, and just focus and stay focused on your own lane. Because when you focus on other people's, imagine you're going 100 Ks on the highway, you're going to crash into them, and then you just fall apart. And that's what you see a lot of, where I think social comparison really destroys people's authenticity and sense of self. And as you said, like that guy who wants to get jacked, I think he's got a much more bigger, deeper issue, like as in psychologically, because that insecurity of him not feeling like he probably sounds like he's fit. Maybe probably approached him. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know what the video is, but
when he approached him, he was.
Yeah, I don't really know, but yeah.
Look, he was already taking it. So when Will asked him, Will was very surprised that you're on roids and doesn't look like you're on roids. You know what I mean? Yeah. If someone's on roids, you can sort of say that.
Yeah.
Okay, you're on roids, but he's like, yeah, I want a 10-week cycle, my 10th week or something, and he's like, okay. He's little.